Hello and welcome back. In today's topic, we are going to talk about how to access DOM using JavaScript. A DOM is Document Object Model, is a programming interface for HTML documents. It represents the structure of HTML web pages, and it allows JavaScript to manipulate the content and visual presentation of HTML documents. There are various methods to access each element in the HTML document. For example, this P is an element. So you have the methods like get element by ID, by class name, by tag name, and a query selector. So these various methods are used to access the HTML document and allows us to manipulate the content and visual presentation of these elements using JavaScript. Okay, let's just start with get element by ID. In order to demonstrate this one, I want to introduce a new paragraph in our HTML page, and that paragraph will have some text. Hello and welcome to our JS crash course, right? So we have this text and this paragraph, and the content of paragraph you can see in the resulting HTML on the browser. But let's say I want to generate the content using JavaScript. So right now I have a paragraph, but it's empty. I want to generate the content using JavaScript. In order to do that, I need this, and I use the get element by ID. Then I need an ID for this element, right? Then here is the ID that I introduced for it, the DEC. These methods are available inside the document object. In the HTML pages, you access to the document, and that document talks to DOM, right? So you have a universal document object. Here I call element by ID, and the ID is DSC. I would change the inside the content of this element, right? Then to change the content, there is this inner HTML. I have copied the content and I paste it here. Now if I run, I get the content again on the screen, on the browser. And this time I have generated this content using JavaScript with the help of DOM. So DOM is creating a virtual structure of the same HTML. And using that virtual structure, you can play with these elements. You can add to it, you can remove the elements at runtime, you can change their content, you can change the visual presentation of the documents using these methods with the help of DOM. So this is how you can play with it. Let's say I want to get the content of this title that we see here, and that's here in this paragraph. The ID is title. In order to get that one, I introduce a new variable, and I would say the variable name is title. Here again I use document dot get element by ID. The ID is title, and I need the inner HTML of this. So here now the content, this JavaScript is awesome, will be inside this title variable, and I can console.log it to see if it actually has the data, right? Okay, as you can see here, I got this from the HTML document. Okay, the next one is the get element by class name. In order to do that, I prepare some elements here, a paragraph, an empty paragraph, and I assign a class for it, and let's call MSG. Let me copy this to have multiple elements here, 3. All of them has the same class, right? And now we are going to select using get elements by class name. And as the name suggests here, get elements by class name. It's plural elements, means you are going to receive more than one element. In case of by ID, it was element, right? Because we are sure that we get one. The ID is unique, but in case of class name, it's not unique, and multiple element can have one class name, so it returns a list of elements. For that, I store it in a variable, elements equal to document dot get elements by class name MSG. And now we have 3 elements here. I could actually use variable, the indexes of these elements variable. It has 3 elements, we know, because there are 3 elements on the document. We could access using index, and we could change some inner HTML for it. Let's say it's elements. Now we have hi, right? But I want to do it in a loop because there are 3. I don't want to do it one by one, but in a loop. So what I could do, I could initialize a loop here, I equal to 0, I less than 3, and I plus plus, right? And now I could say elements of I this time. Now dot inner HTML, I could say item plus I, and now we are going to have 3 items, 0, 1, and 2. So all of them got content using HTML, using JavaScript with the selector that we used class name here. And this is how you work with get elements by class name. And the next one is get elements by tag name. In order to get elements by tag name, it works exactly as class name works. It's again going to return multiple values, multiple elements. Means that when we search or we query for the p tags, right? And then we have 5 p tags already here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If I want to get those, let's say I have a variable called px, and it says document.get elements by tag name, and I pass p. Now p contains all 5 tags, and let's just console log the length if there are 5. So in arrays, there is a function that you can get the length of an array, right? And that is length. So we get 5 elements, as we can see here. And let's just console log px of, I want to get the first element, the first tag value. So I would say px of 0, it's at 0 taken index dot inner HTML. Let's run it. So I get the JavaScript is awesome, right? This is how you query the elements by tags, by tag name. Okay, and the last item is query selector. It is used to select elements by a CSS selector. CSS selectors are like here in this case, I have some stylings, and in CSS, if you want to select an HTML element, for the ID you pass the hash sign, and for the classes you pass dot. Okay, let's see, I have 3 elements here with class name of MSG. How can I access them using query selector? And query selector returns the first matching. If it finds the first one, then that is the result of this selector. Let's see. Let's say I have QS equal to document dot query selector, and here we pass dot annotation with MSG. This is how you select in CSS, right? And now this returns the first matching, and the first matching is item 0. Let's see if that is going to return it. Dot inner HTML, and now I want to console log it. QS, comma, QS. Okay, great. I got the item 0, and it was the first matching. But if you want to get all of them, then there is another function, and that's query selector all, and that returns all 3. Then again, it's a list. If I say all, then document dot query selector all dot msg, and now you get an array. Let's just see the length of this array. Console.log all.length, and I got 3 because we have 3 elements with a CSS selector of MSG, right? This is how you work with these selectors in JavaScript to interact with your HTML document. Okay, now that we have seen how to select elements in JavaScript, it's time to talk about event handling. Event handling is when JavaScript allows you to execute some codes in response to the events. Those events could be like when user clicks on an element or moves the mouse or submit a form. Let's understand event handling with a simple example. We have a button, it says click me with an ID mybtn, and we have a paragraph with an ID p1 that we could select. When we click on this button, we want to change the content of p1 paragraph. And this is done using event handling because the clicking on the button is an event that is fired when the user clicks. And then when you respond to that event, it's called event handling. And let's see how we could get the event and how we handle the event using JavaScript event handlers. Let's get the reference to the button. Here we have a reference to the button that we created. Means that we can get the reference and we can look for the onClick event and do some operation in response to the event. Here we have the button.onClick. When there is an onClick for this button reference that we have, perform or execute this function. And as you can see here, we have an anonymous function that we are going to use to change the content of P1 paragraph. Let's get the reference to the P1 and directly change the content. Okay, now let's test this script and see if it's working. Exactly. So we have the P1 contents updated when user clicks on the button. This is the simplest way. There is a more appropriate way to handle events in JavaScript, which is add event listener. To do this example, the same example with the add event listener, is to have btn. Okay. Now this way that we are, again, we have the reference, the same reference for the button that we created earlier. Now we are adding an event to the button, event listener, sorry. And that event listener is called click, means that whenever there is a click on this element, we are executing this anonymous function again. Let me copy the content from here, and let me comment this one. Let's run the script and see if it's working. Yeah. So it's exactly doing the same thing, but in a more appropriate way. And let's have another example with a form. Let's have a form here on our browser so that the user can submit a form. And to do that, let me write down some HTML markup here. Okay. As you can see here, we have a HTML form with an ID myForm, And inside the form, we have two elements. One is a text field that is for user to input some name. And the other one is a submit, that the user can submit the form. Let's click on this submit to see what is the default behavior of forms in HTML. Okay, as you can see here, there is a default behavior for the forms in HTML, and that is the forms. When you submit the form, it actually submits this form to a backend service. It's supposed there is a backend service, and since we have not defined which service we are going to submit this form, we see 404. But this is okay. This is the normal behavior. We are going to stop the normal behavior of forms and handle this scenario with event handling of the submit form. To do that, let me get the reference for the form and add an event listener the same way that we did for the mouse click. Okay, here I added the event listener for the form, and that event listener is called submit. And when there is this event, we are running this function, and the function is first taking the value from the input, which is the name when user inputs, and then it alerts it with a string saying you have entered the name. Let's run it and see if this is working as expected. Okay, great. So the first thing is that we get the name alerted to the screen for the user, but still the form is submitted for the backend. But this is the behavior that we have to stop when we are handling this event using JavaScript. And to do that, we need to have a parameter here for the event that is fired when this event is happening. Then I could say event.prevent default. And using this event.prevent default, we are actually ignoring or preventing the default behavior of the form, which is my form. Let's run it. We have the data submitted, and there is no submission. There is no actual HTML submission, right? It's only JavaScript. Let's do it again. Yeah. Let me add a space here. Okay, cool. So that's it about event handling in JavaScript. That's it for today's episode. If you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Feel free to drop your question in the comment section below. Till our next session, happy coding.